Morning world, it's the 22nd of May 2019. It's about 9:30 in the morning UK time, and I'm looking at Jupiter Pluto aspects today. This is a long one. As of tomorrow onwards, or from the next time I do a video, when I do Pluto with the inner planets, I'm probably going to split it into two because it's such a long subject and people have only got varying attention spans. But Jupiter and Pluto are equal and opposite. They're the biggest and the smallest, the darkest and the brightest. Jupiter gives out 3 times more light and heat than it takes in from the sun. You can hear Jupiter on the shortwave radio. It pulses. It's alive. Pluto is dark and invisible. And yet Jupiter and Pluto are equal and opposite. In mythology, they're brothers. Pluto / Hades was the first of Saturn's children to be eaten by him. Jupiter was the last child of Saturn, but Saturn's wife substituted Jupiter with a stone so that Jupiter wasn't consumed by Pluto. Instead, Jupiter in later years came back and freed his children from Saturn's belly. And Hades / Pluto, being the first swallowed, was the last one to leave. When the ensuing war between the Olympians and the Titans took place, and the Olympians eventually won, then the 3 brothers, Hades, Poseidon and Zeus, or Pluto, Neptune and Jupiter in the Roman, split the firmament between them. And Poseidon and Neptune took the water world, the seas. Jupiter, Zeus took the overworld, the sky, the land. And Pluto, Hades took the underworld, the dark, the depths. So when you have Jupiter and Pluto together, it's a mixture of the overworld and the underworld, the visible, the invisible, the large, the small, the bright, the dark. So you can see straight away there's a polarity here, a polarity of extremes. When they're conjunct in the same position, which happens on average about every 13 years on average, then this is where everything is larger than life. They can be so caught up in what they're doing that they can ignore others. It's about being over the top, larger than life, and it doesn't matter whether their ambitions are political, economic, financial, domestic. They're going to do things in a big way. Now, these are the people who so identify with us strongly with their own beliefs and passions that they can become almost zealot-like at times, and yet at the same time they have the conviction of their beliefs. They believe in what they're doing, their own beliefs and philosophies to a degree that they will carry it through no matter what else is happening. They can become arrogant, especially if they feel they're being ignored or that no one's listening to them. At the same time, Jupiter conjunct Pluto people, they often rise to positions of authority because they're good at investigation, team management, researching, all the things you need to be a good employer or a good coordinator, organizer and facilitator. This is because they see the big picture, sometimes a bit more than the small details. They certainly aspire to greatness if you've got a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. Ideally, that greatness is not in view and not in the way of being recognized by others. It's more about being comfortable in yourself with your own strengths. The extremes of this position with Pluto, if Pluto is the stronger of the two, then this is the extreme of things like deep sea diving or mining, working in the underworld. And if Jupiter's the stronger of the two, then it's going to be something like a pilot or an astronaut or a high-rise crane operator. It goes to extremes, Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. They don't do anything by half measure. But at the end of the day, as they get older, by which I mean post-40, normally, then these are the people who ultimately aspire to the middle ground, because they know that eventually that extremes are for insecure people who desperately need to achieve in order to feel validated inside themselves. Jupiter-Pluto conjunct is generally a really nice aspect. The sextile between the two, the window of opportunity, there's nothing really nasty that can be said about this. It can get a little bombastic. It's very exuberant. So Jupiter's energy here really helps Pluto lighten up, although Pluto can bring an element of dark humour into Jupiter's more effervescent and bubbly nature. So people with the Jupiter sextile Pluto in their horoscopes, which happens on average about once every 6 years, it brings the opportunity to expand one's interior dark and psychological understandings, whilst at the same time it does bring out a more, not so much dark, but caustic or sharp humour. It also brings a sense of gravity and seriousness into what might otherwise be seen as a bit of a lightweight nature. It's generally a nice aspect because it brings, over the years, a sense of knowledge, maturity and wisdom, although only through experience. Now, the square from Jupiter to Pluto is a really difficult aspect because it's known as the storm in the teacup aspect. Why have merely a drama if you can make a crisis out of it? And if you're born with Jupiter square Pluto, then when young, you're going to recognise your own capacity to go to extremes, either of growth and expansion or restriction and limitation. Jupiter squares Pluto on average every 6 years. There can be a kind of intrinsic resistance to imposed religion, philosophy. And on the one hand, this does bring a kind of potential problem for legal trouble or social exclusion, although conversely, this aspect is really strong in the charts of very high-ranking church people. Church men normally. For example, Arnold Schwarzenegger has this, his desire to always be the best under the most difficult of circumstances, whether that's political or celluloid. Tom Jones, the singer, has this. He was a philanderer, and he was people with Jupiter Pluto can be very sexually gluttonous or abstemious. Tom Jones had many alleged infidelities, although he still remains married to his first love. Jupiter Pluto is complicated because it's about constant experiences that challenge their sense of proportion. When are they strong enough inside themselves to say, I'll stop here, I've had enough? Sure, they can get a lot of money out of this. They can be incredible hoarders, even if they're not going to use what they hoard, because there is this fear of the end of the world, so quickly get some more food in just in case. There's certainly a survivalist thing in this, which can sometimes go to the point of fanaticism. Normally Jupiter Pluto manages to survive anything, but it does so through being overly prepared. There is an element of bombasticness around the Jupiter square Pluto. Can they ever have enough? The Jupiter trine Pluto is actually a lovely aspect. As long as there's a degree of integrity around one's dealings, there will never be any legal or moral issues. Many clients I have with Jupiter trine Pluto, when I was researching my book on Pluto, one of the most common comments was they can't lie. They can't act in a way that's cheating because it's doing themselves down and harming others as well, and it gives them a bad conscience. So Jupiter trine Pluto people, which happens every 6 years, do seem to have a strong conscience. Now Pluto deals with the deep resources and Jupiter deals with growth. So when these two are in healthy aspect with each other, as a trine is, it does bring the ability to expand in one's resources, generally with the right aspiration and the desire to achieve one's goals, as long as those goals are also for the benefit of others. There's certainly a strong ethic here and the desire to correct situations before they get worse. And then we come to the Jupiter-Pluto opposition. Now, this is not a particularly easy aspect, but it's not as challenging as the square. It can take them to heaven, it can take them to hell. It's very much the all or nothing aspect. This can be extreme when it comes to religious or economic viewpoints or perspectives. which is great if it's done with a degree of social responsibility for the common good, but it's not so great if it's seeking to impose one's own philosophies on other or others. So the real challenge of Jupiter opposite Pluto is to walk your talk whilst deliberately choosing not to go to extremes. Viewed from a Plutonic perspective, Jupiter opposite Pluto leads to a capacity for kind of underground or subversive actions which can really not have the brake on. It can lead to extremes. It brings a hard-nosed, ruthless attitude, a kind of moral and ethical judgment which can be almost ruthless. Not merciless, because merciless is cruel and callous, but ruthless is just yes, no, black, white. And certainly people with Jupiter opposite Pluto in their birth horoscope will understand what it is that drives others into fundamentalist perspectives. But when viewed for a Jupiter, from a Jupiterian perspective, as one gets older, the capacity for recognizing one's ability to either undercut and undermine or overstretch and overreach becomes more and more obvious. On one hand, this is the nun, the monk, the ascetic, the person who runs away from the world and hides because they want to refine and purify themselves and they see the world as being toxic. Whilst the alternative is the macho bully boy, regardless of gender, who seeks to impose their will on others and is utterly convinced of the righteousness of their ways. And we see so many of this at the moment. There can be a holier than thou attitude, but these people are always going to do big things. If they're going to do anything, they're going to do it in a big way, which is why these people are really good at doing things like bank robberies or running World Health programs. All or nothing. Okay, that's my take on Jupiter-Pluto. Bearing in mind we have the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn coming up next year, which is really going to rewrite the old world order at the political level. Look forward to that one. Catch you later, world. Bye.